Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes, where we're taking a deep dive into Cornelius Ryan's seminal work, The Longest Day, June 6, 1944. Now, when you hear D-Day, you probably think of, big maps, arrows, grand strategy. But today, our mission is a bit different. We want to get into the human experience. Ryan's book, it really dives into the stories of everyone involved, the Allies, sure, but also the German defenders, and maybe most importantly, the French civilians just caught in the middle. And the reason it feels so real, so vivid, is Ryan's approach. He actually interviewed, get this, over 700 survivors. He weaves their personal stories together into this incredible narrative. And just to set the scene, think about this quote from Field Marshal Erwin Rommel back in April 44. He said, "Believe me, Lang, the first 24 hours of the invasion will be decisive for the Allies as well as Germany. It will be the longest day." Chilling. Right.
Absolutely chilling. And that quote, it really nails the core themes of the book.
Yeah.
The Longest Day isn't just, a history lesson. It digs into the incredible tension, the planning, yes, but also the strategic mistakes leading up to it all. Ryan shows you the sheer chaos, the confusion of those first hours. But I think the most powerful part is how it highlights individual moments, acts of bravery, moments of terror, and just this raw human resilience. And because he uses so many perspectives, from the top brass down to the ordinary soldier, and the civilians too, you get this really full, immersive picture. It feels balanced.
Okay, let's get into it then. Ryan starts the story in those hours just before H hour, the big moment. He calls it the wait. So what's happening on the German side, with Rommel specifically?
Right, the wait, from Rommel's viewpoint, it's fascinating and pretty tragic looking back. He's at his HQ, La Roche-Guyon, early June. And he is absolutely driven, almost obsessed with strengthening the Atlantic Wall. He's personally designing these unique obstacles. We're talking jagged steel things, sawtoothed gates, mines everywhere, even flooding whole areas to make these deadly marshes. He was hands-on. His big disagreement, especially with von Rundstedt, was about strategy. Rommel was convinced, absolutely convinced, they had to stop the Allies right on the beaches. Why? Because he believed Allied air power would be so dominant that German reserves, especially the crucial panzer tanks, just wouldn't be able to get to the fight once it started inland.
Which led directly to that longest day prediction.
Exactly. He saw those first 24 hours as make or break. And the massive irony, the twist of fate, despite believing this so strongly, he wasn't even there. He was on leave in Germany for his wife's birthday when the invasion hit. A catastrophic absence at the worst possible moment left a huge leadership gap.
That's just incredible. The guy most focused on that initial fight isn't there. Shows the confusion on their side. Okay, so while Rommel's away and German command is kind of fumbling, what about the Allies? How were they keeping things secret and, signaling the go-ahead?
The intelligence side. It was this intricate dance of deception. German intelligence, they weren't clueless. Agents like Meyer noticed unusual radio silence. They knew something was up. But the Allies had these really clever signals for the French resistance. The most famous is that Verlaine poem broadcast over the BBC. First part, Les sanglots longs, les violons de l'automne. The long sobs of autumn violins that went out June 1st. Sort of an initial heads up.
Right.
Then June 5th came the second line. Baissons mon cœur d'une langueur monotone. Wound my heart with monotonous languor. That meant invasion within 48 hours.
Straight out of a spy movie.
Totally. And yet, even with these signals, which seem so clear now, the German high command was still, largely convinced it wasn't the main invasion or it was happening elsewhere, like Calais. They failed to fully alert the 7th Army in Normandy. And believe it or not, key commanders were actually away from their posts attending a war game in Rennes.
Just
Disbelief and misinterpretation right when they needed clarity.
a war game. Wow. Okay, so the Germans are confused. What about the Allies waiting? The pressure on Eisenhower must have been immense.
Well, immense is an understatement. You got Eisenhower responsible for nearly 3 million troops. Everything is poised, and he has to make the call. He postpones D-Day from June 5th to the 6th because the weather in the Channel was just awful. A massive storm. It was a huge risk. Yeah. Holding that massive force, ships loaded, men briefed for another 24 hours, the chances of a security leak just skyrocketed.
And speaking of leaks, or near leaks, that crossword story.
Right. That's wild. MI5, the British intelligence agency, actually investigated this physics teacher, Leonard Sidney Daw. Why? Because his crosswords in the London Daily Telegraph, purely by coincidence, started featuring D-Day code words: Overlords, Omaha, Utah, Mulberry, Neptune.
No way.
Yes. Turned out to be just a crazy coincidence. He got the words from students, apparently. But imagine the panic at MI5 for a moment. Meanwhile, you have these tiny midget submarines like the X-23 sitting submerged off the French coast for hours in the freezing cold, just waiting. Their job was to surface at the last moment and use lights and beacons to guide the British and Canadian fleets to the right beaches. Incredible bravery and patience.
It's mind-boggling, the layers of planning and secrecy and sheer chance. But what about the soldiers themselves, the guys on the ships, the paratroopers waiting? What was that wait like for them?
Yet Ryan really brings that human cost of waiting to life. The emotions were all over the place. You had guys like Private Dutch Schultz. He won $2,500 gambling. A huge amount then. But he was so convinced that having the money meant he'd die, he gambled until he lost every single cent. Just pure superstition born of terror.
Wow.
Then there was this sheer physical misery. Seasickness was rampant on those crowded landing craft tossing in the rough channel. Men were horribly ill, some almost wishing the invasion would start just so they could get off the boats.
Anything to get on solid ground, I guess.
Pretty much. But you also had this quiet, grim determination. Company Sergeant Major Stanley Hollis, he was a Dunkirk veteran, seen some awful stuff. He apparently told his men he was actually looking forward to getting back to France to, quote, kill some more Germans. Very personal motivation there. And then almost surreal optimism. A young Ranger Sergeant, Larry Johnson, wrote a letter asking a girl for a date in Paris for early June. Like it was just another week.
Yeah.
The range of human reactions. It's powerful.
So the waiting finally ends. The night falls on June 6th, and the invasion kicks off with the airborne landings. How did that go? Sounds like chaos.
Utter chaos is the right word. The paratroopers got scattered everywhere. Intense German anti-aircraft fire, what they called flak, plus navigation errors, strong winds. It was a mess. Guys were dropped miles from their landing zones, some tragically drowned in those flooded marshes Rommel had ordered created, weighed down by maybe 80 pounds of gear. You had bizarre encounters. Private Robert Murphy, one of the very first Americans down, literally landed in a French school teacher's garden, right in their pea patch.
Not the welcome party he expected.
Definitely not. And to find each other in the dark, they used these little toy crickets. Click, clack, you'd click yours, hope to hear 2 clicks back. That's how you knew it was a friendly. But amidst all that confusion, there were critical successes. Major John Howard's British glider troops took the vital bridges over the Caen Canal and Orne River Pegasus Bridge in like 15 minutes. An incredible feat.
And the charges weren't set.
Amazingly, no. The German demolition charges were found nearby, but they hadn't been placed on the bridge yet. Huge stroke of luck for the Allies. Then you had the assault on the Merville Battery, Colonel Otway's British paratroopers. A heavily fortified German gun position. It was considered almost a suicide mission. They were severely understrength after the chaotic drop, but they attacked anyway, using hunting horns as signals in the confusion. They took it through sheer grit, suffering heavy losses, and they managed to fire off a yellow success flare just minutes before the Royal Navy was scheduled to basically obliterate the entire position with shell fire. Talk about cutting it close.
Incredible stories. So with paratroopers landing, bridges being taken, were the Germans on the ground finally waking up to what was happening? Or was the confusion still reigning?
Largely, the confusion continued. It's quite remarkable. You have Major Werner Pluskat stationed overlooking what would become Omaha Beach. He sees ships appearing on the horizon and reports it up the chain, but his superiors basically tell him he's seeing things, or it's just a small raid, a diversion. They dismiss his reports repeatedly.
Unbelievable.
Meanwhile, General Marks, a key corps commander in Normandy, is miles away celebrating his birthday, completely unaware for critical hours. And Rommel, as we said, is still in Germany, totally out of the loop. This delay in recognizing the scale of the invasion and reacting, especially getting those panzer divisions moving, was absolutely critical. Even Colonel Pips Briller, the Luftwaffe fighter ace, when he finally got orders, famously found he only had his wingman and himself just 2 planes available to attack the entire Allied fleet. 2 planes against thousands of ships. It shows the state of their readiness and communication.
Just incredible failures at the top. Okay, so then comes the day. The main event, the seaborne assault. The scale must have been mind-blowing.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine dawn breaking, and the sea is just covered with ships, almost 5,000 vessels, battleships, destroyers, troop transports, tiny landing craft, everything, carrying over 200,000 men. But the experiences on the beaches were drastically different. Take Utah Beach. By a stroke of luck, a navigation error actually put the first wave slightly off course into an area with much weaker defenses.
Really? A mistake helped them.
It did. And Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., Teddy Roosevelt's son, who had insisted on landing with the first wave despite his age and health issues, he famously realized the mistake and just calmly started directing troops inland from this new, less dangerous spot, walking around with a cane, seemingly unfazed by mortar fire. Remarkable leadership.
But Omaha was different.
Omaha was hell, a complete nightmare. The planners expected the pre-landing aerial and naval bombardment to flatten the German defenses, clear the obstacles. It just didn't happen. The bombs largely missed, falling too far inland, or couldn't penetrate the reinforced German concrete bunkers. Those defenses were mostly intact when the first troops hit the beach.
Oh, man.
So the first waves ran into this wall of uncut barbed wire mines and devastating machine gun and artillery fire from guns the bombardment was supposed to destroy. Men were cut down on the water, weighed down by gear, drowning. Others made it to the narrow strip of shingle beach only to be pinned down, unable to advance. The casualties were horrific right from the start. The beach became a killing zone.
It's almost impossible to comprehend that. Yet somehow they got off the beach. How? What turned the tide on Omaha?
Leadership. Pure, raw leadership under fire and incredible individual bravery. Guys like Brigadier General Norman Cota and Colonel George Taylor realized the situation was desperate. Staying on the beach meant death. Taylor's famous line, yelling at his men, two kinds of people are staying on this beach, the dead and those who are going to die. Now let's get the hell out of here.
Wow. Direct.
Brutally direct. But it worked. It shocked men out of their paralysis. Cota was similar, walking the beach, rallying troops, organizing breakthroughs. Small groups started finding ways through the wire, up the bluffs. It was piecemeal, chaotic, but they started moving inland. And you also had the Rangers at Pointe du Hoc, just west of Omaha, that incredible assault up the 100-foot cliffs.
Right, to take out the big guns.
Exactly. They climbed ropes and ladders under fire, a seemingly impossible task, fought their way to the top, only to find the massive guns weren't there. They'd been moved inland shortly before D-Day.
Oh, the irony. After all that.
Crushing irony. But their heroic assault, even though the primary target wasn't there, tied up German defenders and drew attention away from Omaha Beach, which probably helped the main landings eventually succeed. A costly but significant diversion.
So while Omaha was this desperate fight, what about the British and Canadian beaches? Sword, Juno, Gold, similar struggles.
They faced fierce fighting too, absolutely. But the character was a bit different. It wasn't quite the unmitigated disaster that Omaha initially was. You had these almost surreal moments. Lord Lovett's commandos landing on Sword Beach, led by his personal piper playing Highland tunes. Soldiers singing patriotic songs as they went ashore on Juno.
Bagpipes and singing under fire.
Yeah, a strange mix of ceremony and deadly combat. But the resistance was tough. The Canadians on Juno at places like Courseulles faced strong German positions and took heavy casualties getting off the beach. They also encountered some grim realities, like finding executed German prisoners, probably killed by resistance fighters. War is messy, and the British on Golden Sword had their own tough spots. Urban fighting in towns like Langrune and Lyon-sur-Mer proved incredibly difficult. Seaside villas turned out to be concrete fortresses, street by street, house by house fighting. Progress was often slow and bloody. And all this time, the Germans are still struggling to react effectively. You mentioned Colonel Priller's two planes.
Yeah, the Luftwaffe's big response.
Pretty much sums it up. The crucial 21st Panzer Division, stationed near Cannes, which could have made a huge difference if thrown at the beaches early. Its counterattack was delayed for hours. Conflicting orders, Hitler's hesitation to release Panzer reserves. When they finally did attack late in the day, they probed towards the coast between Sword and Juno, but it was too little, too late, and poorly coordinated. They were pushed back by Allied air power and anti-tank guns. And Rommel, he's literally racing back across France in his staff car, finally grasping the full reality. His prediction had come true, and the decisive hours were slipping away. The chance to repel the invasion at the water's edge was lost.
So much depended on those initial hours and the German response, or lack thereof. What about the people not in uniform? The French civilians, the folks back home? How did Ryan portray their D-Day?
Ryan really makes you feel their experience, too. It's heartbreaking sometimes. You have stories like Paul Gazengel, the cafe owner near Utah Beach. He gets wounded in the shelling, and then somehow gets mistaken for a collaborator by the Allies and shipped off to England for interrogation. Just unbelievable bad luck. They sent him back weeks later saying, oops, mistake.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. And far more tragically, in Carrion, which saw heavy fighting later, the Gestapo executed 92 French citizens on D-Day itself. Prisoners, resistance suspects, just rounded up and shot as the invasion began. A brutal reminder of the occupation. And back home. When Eisenhower's announcement finally came over the radio, there was this huge wave of relief, but also intense anxiety. People crowded into churches praying. But then the casualty reports started trickling in. Ryan highlights Bedford, Virginia, a small town that provided a company of soldiers to the National Guard. They landed on Omaha. Bedford lost 19 of its young men on D-Day, devastating losses for such a small community. It brings the cost home in a really personal way. It wasn't just armies, it was sons, brothers, husbands.
Absolutely. So by the end of June 6th, this longest day, The Allies had managed to link up most of the beachheads with the airborne troops dropped inland. The foothold was there, right?
Yes, fragile in places, especially around Omaha still.
Huh.
But the foothold was secured. They were ashore, and they weren't going back. The Atlantic Wall had been breached.
Looking back at Ryan's whole account, then, this deep dive really underscores that D-Day wasn't some neat, tidy military victory. It was, as you said, sprawling, chaotic, deeply human. A day where these huge strategic plans slammed right into individual moments of terror, bravery, confusion, and just plain luck. Tiny things had huge consequences.
Exactly. And if you step back and look at the big picture Ryan paints, it's clear that success wasn't just about the planning, meticulous as it was. It really hung on incredible courage from ordinary people, unbelievable resilience under fire, and yeah, a good dose of luck sometimes.
All happening amidst this fog of war, this immense confusion on all sides. It really hammers home the human cost and how thin that line between success and utter disaster really was. Which leaves us with a big question, I think. When you face these huge, world-changing crises like D-Day, how much does history turn on the brilliant plans made beforehand? And how much does it turn on the unpredictable actions, the grit, the fear, the split-second choices of the individuals actually living through it on the ground? What do you think?